Hello and welcome to episode 221 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. My good friend and co-host Sarah Says will be back on the show today to wrap up our conversation about Disney's California Adventure. Sarah was able to experience DCA even before it opened to the general public and has been able to witness almost every change that has happened to the park. Let's just get right into the conversation this week. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Another big addition that came to DCA was in June of 2010 when World of Color started.
Yes, and that was a big deal. It was hard to get a spot to watch World of Color, though. I remember the first time I saw it, I actually paid extra to do their dining package. Or dessert package or whatever it was. So we would have a spot saved to see it because otherwise we could not get a spot to see World of Color.
So I think that was definitely a step in the right direction because then you have that part of the night where the fireworks at Disneyland are crowding people on Main Street. If you could get half of the park to sort of hop over and try to see World of Color, especially on nights that, and this happens a lot, when the wind and the dryness makes it so they can't do fireworks, to have a show like World of Color that you can do every night regardless of the conditions in the area, I think that was a big deal. What was World of Color like at the beginning? Because it has had a few incarnations, correct?
So it has, and I never saw it at the beginning because we could never find a spot and I wasn't going to fight for it. Like, I'm not one of those diehards that's like, I'm going to elbow my way in and watch it. I did not see it in person until the iteration that was done with Neil Patrick Harris. I'm trying to remember what year that was. It was probably the second or third iteration. I can't remember, but they kept a lot of, one thing I like about World of Colors, they kept a lot of it the same, but they also changed it to go with whatever was popular now. So they added things in and movies in and things like what people complain a lot about during fireworks, how they're like, oh, they should have music from this or they should have music from this. With World of Color, they could do that. And they could add it in with the projections, which was pretty cool. They have they had this amazing section that was Pirates of the Caribbean. So cool.
And then as they continued to add to this park, they continued to change things. What were some of the next additions and some of the next re-themes that happened to the park that had it starting to look more like it looks today?
Yeah, so after that, the next really big thing that happened besides some of the re-themes, I mean, they ended up over on the right side where Mulholland Madness was, that became Goofy Sky School, and they changed the swings from the buzzing swings or the orange stinger to the silly symphony swings. And they started to kind of add it, they turned it into the Mickey's Fun Wheel. They started adding more Pixar things, and with the entrance of Pixar, we got Cars Land, which was huge. Like, this was absolutely huge when that opened back in 2015, because that brought in so many more people. It gave you so many more experiences. I mean, there's only one e-ticket attraction in Cars Land, which is Radiator Springs Racers, but it was being, for the first time, I think, in that park, people actually felt immersed in the land. It wasn't just you kind of walking through an area that looks like old Hollywood or it looks like old something else. You're in Radiator Springs and you are the size of the car. So it's kind of like Bugs Land. It's not big though. So you can be immersed and it's like, oh, I'm like a bug. But Cars Land completely, I think, changed the game for that whole park.
Yeah, it is definitely the thing at DCA, even with some of the subsequent additions that have been added, we'll talk about in just a little bit. It is the one thing at DCA that feels like it would work at Disneyland.
Exactly. It totally does. Yeah.
And when you have this e-ticket attraction like Radiator Springs Racers, I look back to our trip and you're planning your week. We had 5 days. So we got there halfway through Monday. We got there at like 1:00 in the afternoon. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we were going to rope drop. So now we had a reason to rope drop 2 days at DCA and 2 days over at Disneyland because we wanted to rope drop Radiator Springs Racers one day and make sure that we got on that and we got to experience that, even though it is better at night, and that gave us a reason to come back at night, which is important as well because you don't want Disneyland Park crowded too much at night. Now you have World of Color. Now you have this e-ticket ride that is better after the sun goes down than it is during the day. So it gets people to want to get that park hopper ticket. It gets people to bounce back and forth across the esplanade. Whereas before, like you said, they had to offer a DCA ticket so much cheaper than a Disneyland ticket. And now all of a sudden those prices could be a little closer. You had more of an incentive to get a park hopper ticket. You had the incentive to rope drop and spend the morning in one of the parks instead of just always rope dropping Main Street USA at Disneyland.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It definitely, like I said, changed the game for people going to the parks as well, that you finally could be like, oh, cool, I can actually plan something. And then, of course, it got even better when they announced Avengers Campus. So it's like, oh, cool, now we have something new to look forward to. And there's more things that it also helped, I believe, that it really helped with like people distribution in the park. Because for a while, like when James and I, my husband, went to DCA our first time seeing Cars Land, and it was very people heavy back there because it was the cool new thing, and it was where everybody wanted to be when they were in that park, because it's like you want to experience all these cool things. And then as you went out to the rest of the park, it was very light. But I think now too, with like the new things being added in, of course, it's giving that people distribution a little better too. So you're not just all jammed in one land.
And before we get to Avengers Campus, and I do want to talk about that a lot because we do really, really enjoy that land, even though it is a little small and it has some issues, but we can talk about them as well. But one of the e-tickets in Avengers Campus, actually the only e-ticket when it opened, was a re-theme of Tower of Terror. And
Correct.
that is Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. I know that it might not be popular with everybody, but because Tower of Terror still exists in other parks throughout the world, you seem to really, really like this re-theme to Guardians of the Galaxy. You have a blast riding this ride.
Yes.
So why don't you talk about
it
it a little bit? Why don't you give people a little description of how they changed it, and if you think that altered the park's dynamics at all as well?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Tower of Terror. I don't love Tower of Terror, but I like it. But I love Mission Breakout. They definitely changed the facade. The facade is still Tower of Terror. They changed it though and upgraded it, of course, to make it look like it's all outer spacey, because it is where the collector is. So now instead of going through this old decrepit outside of a hotel into a lobby, you're going through the outside of the collector's, I don't even know what it is. It's like it's not his house. I don't know but anyway, where the collector is. But as you walk in, instead of being in this old spooky lobby, you're in seeing this collection that you have seen in the movies. You're like, oh my gosh, there's the dog, and there's this, and there's that, and you're looking around, and there's Figment. You really got to look for Figment though. So you're really being immersed, and there's so many little hidden things. So as you're walking around in line, you can see the areas where Rocket has like left his mark, his paw prints. You can see little things are written down. You can see all these little clues as to what's happening. It's really immersing you in a story that you're involved in. So in Tower of Terror, you were experiencing something that had happened in the past. In Mission Breakout, you are part of the story. So you are someone who is being brought in. You're going to help save the Guardians of the Galaxy and help Rocket do this. And I mean, who can't not love a Rocket Raccoon animatronic? I mean, come on. It's like the best thing. So you go in and you are getting your mission, and you're going and you're helping save the Guardians.
In a recent episode of the podcast, my other co-host Maz and I did a tier list of all of the pre-shows at Walt Disney World. And you can go back and you can listen to that episode. I'm not going to spoil it for you, except for to say that Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind got a ridiculously low score. And one of the reasons is it would have been so gosh darn easy for them to put a replica Rocket animatronic on that ride, but they decided to cheap out and do a screen. And because they cheaped out and did a screen combined with some other factors, we gave that pre-show a very, very bad score. But I would say that you would have to give the Mission Breakout pre-show, that has to get a great grade from you, because it has an animatronic. When you're walking through the building, like, people know I'm not a big drop fan. I've talked about this before, but I actually went through the queue with you when we were on that vacation because I wanted to see all of the different theming on the inside, and it really is worth it. And then I just did the chicken exit, and I hung out in the amazing store that you can hang out in afterwards and listen to 70s and 80s music until you were done.
Exactly.
And what this did was also create the opportunity to expand and have Avengers Campus, because they sort of retroactively added this to Avengers Campus at Disney California Adventure. We were some of the first people to visit this land when it opened. There was a partial open in 2020 or something like that, but then it really didn't open until after the parks reopened from the pandemic in 2021. We were there before they had Magic Key people there. Like, we were in this land when it was relatively empty. You still had
it had only been open for like 2 months or something when we went.
Yeah, you had to. Well, so much so that we were some of the first people from out of state who went.
Yes.
Because you weren't allowed to go if you were out of state until a certain time. And we still had to get boarding groups for Web-Slingers.
Yeah.
What do you think about this land? It's very small.
It is.
But they have the character shows. They have Pym's Test Kitchen. They have, obviously, Spider-Man Web-Slingers, which we don't have to mention how much better you are at it than I am. Like, we can just leave that for people to guess. What do you think about these attractions, restaurants, and shows that have been added to DCA? Do you think they're a good addition? And do you think that they sort of help to balance out that park more and give you more and more reasons to spend a longer time on that side of the esplanade?
The addition of Avengers Campus I love. I don't like how small it is, but as we have seen, there is potential for it to grow. But the problem is they have this amazing wandering just shows constantly throughout there. I mean, there's stuff happening with the Avengers. There's stuff happening, the Wakandan Warriors. There's Spider-Man. There was not anymore, but there was Doctor Strange. There was all these different things which happen randomly, basically. Like I thought it was random. If it's time set, I mean, I have no idea. But all this stuff would happen. But there's just, with big crowds, there's nowhere for people to stop and look and leave a walkway open. So that's something that they have all this fantastic stuff to watch and experience. And the fact that they can bring these Avengers characters in and out so fluidly and easily. I mean, like it's so cool because it's not something that has to be hugely planned. I mean, Deadpool all of a sudden shows up and you're like, what? And so these things are happening, but they don't have the space to accommodate large crowds. So like when we were there, we could stand and watch and it wasn't overly crowded, but I can't even imagine right now going with my child and us being standing somewhere and the Wakandan warriors walking out where we could just stand and watch them walk. You couldn't do that now. There'd be way too many people. You just have to go find a spot where they end up stopping. So there's definitely a lot of room for growth physically in that part of the park. I think it helps bring a lot of people over because Marvel is huge right now. I mean, it's been huge forever. And the fact that it changes so much, I think people really want to see that.
I think that's an underappreciated part of this land of Avengers Campus is every time Disney Plus does a new Marvel TV show, every time there's a new movie in the cinematic universe, they can have that character appear at the park for a few days. Like, it doesn't have to be a permanent addition to the park. And as we mentioned earlier, when we talked about how many hope to be actors and actresses are in the Los Angeles area, they certainly have a talent pool to pull from here. I remember one of my favorite parts from back in 2021 when we were there was the Wakanda show, and I was watching you watch a kid interact.
Yeah, it was so cute.
And this kid was interacting with, one of the cast members, one of the Wakanda leaders. I can't exactly remember the name of that particular type of character, but this kid was all into it, and he was interacting with the characters the whole time. And even though they had a little bit of a show, they had a little bit of a script, they were able to work on their toes enough to realize that this was a great moment and that everybody was going to enjoy this. And it was so fun. It was so cute. I liked that they had the shows on top of the building. That was a way that they could do these shows without crowding an already small land. Everybody could sort of stand around and watch them, but the show wasn't happening at people level. So you didn't have to worry about any of the fight scenes or any of the choreography being messed up by somebody just aimlessly walking somewhere they weren't supposed to walk. Right. We've talked about the Spider-Man show with the Spider-Man animatronic that they throw through the air. And then afterwards you get to meet Spider-Man. That is another really great experience. And as we turn our sights to the future, you did mention that there is the possibility of expansion. And there are supposed to be 2 new rides coming to this land. I don't know where they're going to fit them, because
I really feel like they're going to open up the side next to the building that has a big wall on it right now. I have a feeling that that's going to open up and it's going to be like a walkway.
There's supposed to be 2 new rides. One of them an e-ticket, the big e-ticket we've been promised since 2021 when they opened it. And they're like, this isn't the end of this. There's going to be an expansion. And I don't know if we believed them, but they said at D23 that it's going to be coming. And then there is another attraction that is not going to be an e-ticket, but is going to be something that should eat a lot of people. And that is something that Disney's California Adventure certainly needs, is more people eating rides. And then we have 2 other really big experiences that should be coming in the future to DCA. An entire Avatar section. I don't know if it's going to be big enough to be considered a land, but it is also going to come with a boat ride. What do you think about what this is going to do? It's kind of going to be the final nail in the coffin of the California theming
Right.
unless they just try to make this like, oh, it's the movies.
Right. Yeah. Unless that's what they end up doing with it. Cause yeah, I'm really interested to see what they do because it seems like such an odd park to choose to put Pandora or like Avatar in. I was really thinking it was going to Disneyland, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's like at this point they've gone so far from the whole California. I mean, yes, they still have like Soarin' and they still have the Grizzly Peak area and those, so they have like a little bit of California in there, but yeah, I think at this point it's like, are they going to change the name like they did to Euro Disney?
Yeah, Euro Disney, and then across the street at Disney Studios, that's now going to be like Walt Disney Adventure Park or
Right.
something. And they have definitely shown a willingness to, if a theme doesn't work, to just scrapping that theme and going for quality over theming. And I know a lot of people in the Disney community don't like that. They would rather keep a lot of that theming, but I think this Avatar area is going to be impressive. I just hope they don't cheap out on it, because if they make it as impressive as Pandora, the World of Avatar in Disney's Animal Kingdom, even if it's smaller, like that's not a big land either, actually. It's just a quick service and 2 rides. But if they make it even a smaller version of that, as long as they focus on that attention to detail that everybody loves about Pandora, I think this land should be something that is very, very successful. And they're definitely down for the boat rides at DCA, because the other expansion that they're talking about is a Coco ride. What do you think about Coco? Because I think that with the Mexican culture that is associated with the movie Coco, that it actually does fit in the theming of California. California used to be a part of Mexico. There is certainly a lot of Mexican culture in the state. So even though it is from another country technically, I do feel like it works in that theme park. And I think that Coco needs a really big e-ticket attraction, a lot of animatronics. I want to know what it's like to be in that world, because that world is so impressive and so beautiful and so all-encompassing. Like when you talk about immersion, I want to be immersed in that world. I want to be able to look around and not see anything from my world. I want to see all of that area. And I think if they do this right, if they have that one big room that you enter and everything makes you feel like you are there, I think this could be a game changer ride. Just don't do it like they do Frozen Ever After in Epcot. Have this be real animatronics. Have it be maybe projections in the background to give things a sense of kinetic energy, like things are moving. But everything in the foreground, have it be an animatronic. Make sure that you spend the money to make this impressive. And I think it will always have long lines, but also be able to eat a lot of people. You can put a lot of people on a boat that goes slowly through a ride like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was so excited when I heard they were putting Coco in there, because there's already been an area, very small area, that they celebrate different holidays. And there's a big Coco presence there just in general. And then now I believe there's also a big Encanto presence as well. But I love that they're finally going to dedicate that, because also a very large chunk of people who visit Disneyland and DCA are from Mexico. I mean, it's so much closer for them to come and visit up in Southern California than it is for them to go to Florida. And so having that representation in the park, I think, is incredibly important. And it's also giving them, I mean, that was the top movie in South America and in Mexico for so long. And to give them that piece of the park with a really cool ride. I agree. They have to do something amazing with it, but they have this fantastic world to work with. I mean, the movie Coco is visually stunning. It's got tons of colors, but it's also muted. It's just, there's so much to work with that I think they will come out with something fantastic. And I really hope that, based on like when we talked about our animatronic fails, that we don't have to deal with that too much.
Definitely. And I would like to point out that, yes, it depends on what part of Mexico, whether it's closer to go to Florida or California.
Right. Oh, that's true. That's true.
There are parts of Mexico that are closer to Florida. Just a quick flight over the Gulf of America.
True. I didn't think about that. I always think of, from living where I live, I always think of the people who live more in northern Mexico. So
I understand, and I hope everybody knows that that was a joke. It is always the Gulf of Mexico to me. And I do think that another thing that you brought up in that answer was something that I didn't even think of addressing in this episode, but DCA, you know, it was originally going to be Westcott, and Epcot is known for its festivals. Well, now DCA has sort of morphed into the festival park. They have a food and wine type festival. They do the Chinese New Year festival. And I think something that we should talk about here for just a couple of minutes before we wrap this up is the biggest thing at DCA is the Oogie Boogie Bash. And this is great because whereas over at Walt Disney World, they take up Magic Kingdom a lot during the Halloween season. And at Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World, the Halloween season starts in early August now. So the main people eating park has a special ticket event like 3-4 times a week over at Walt Disney World at this time of year. DCA, which is definitely, even with all of the expansions and additions and improvements, is still the second tier park at Disneyland Resort. They have turned Oogie Boogie Bash into a way to really, really control crowds. This thing sells out like that.
Oh, so fast.
It is such an impressive event. They have almost all the villains there. You get to interact with the villains in such an amazing way. We've mentioned the actors in the Southern California area. They are all bringing their best. The cast members, the friends of the characters, they are always showing up and just being completely incredible. And people love this.
They have obscure characters, too. They have obscure villains.
And that's awesome. It is one of those events that's for the Disney purist, but also for the Hot Topic kids, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So it really does appeal to a wide variety of people. And I know when the tickets go on sale for that, we see everybody on Diz Twitter is like stressing out. They're sweating. They have the white knuckles and they are getting ready.
I would love to go, but I would not want to. Oh man, the watching these people stress out over getting tickets to it. Like I would love to go to Oogie Boogie Bash so bad, but at the same time, I'm like, I do not want to put myself through the stress of trying to get a ticket.
But I think the great thing that it does is continue to give you reasons to go over to DCA. And I don't think they could waste Disneyland on an event like this. Disneyland has the after hours events. They do like 90s night or 80s night. They do the Valentine's. They do Pride. They do a bunch of those special nights, Star Wars night. But those are few and far between. It's not something that happens multiple times a week for a 2-month period like the Oogie Boogie Bash. So the fact that they're able to do this over at DCA is a really, really great thing. Overall, as we wrap up this episode, Sarah, what are your thoughts on the progression of DCA? Are you happy that that's the theme park that we eventually got across the esplanade from Disneyland? Or do you think that you would have rathered have a Westcott or maybe something completely different?
As cool as Westcott sounded, I am really pleased with what DCA has turned into. I think it has something for literally everyone in it. And it is definitely not a celebration of California anymore. So the name doesn't fit. But I feel like, especially for people like me who don't mind IP and actually enjoy some IP, it's a really entertaining park. And there's a lot to do. And there's a lot of different things. It's not like you're just seeing the same thing like the original DCA where it was like, it was, you are really like, no matter where you go in the park, you're going to have a different experience, which I really like. I don't know if there's anything else that I could think of that would be there. I mean, that they could have done instead, but I am happy with what DCA has turned out to be over the years. From seeing it in its very, very early iteration to seeing it now, I do like the changes that they've made.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. This was such a great talk.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me back.
This has been episode 221 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We will be back next Thursday when I'll have another episode in our series about former Disney chairman and CEO Michael Eisner. Disney MGM Studios, Disney's Hollywood Studios, or the Hollywood that never was and always will be, whatever you call it, opened on May 1st, 1989. We are going to celebrate the anniversary by talking about the different iterations of the park over the years, but most importantly, the reasons Michael Eisner thought it was so important to add it to Magic Kingdom and Epcot. That will be next Thursday on Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Until then, have a great week.